and that's 151 pages that was published 3 hours ago. So let me turn it over to Kelly Zier, your city attorney, for a moment. But before I do so, what I would say is, and Kelly, correct me if I will get this wrong, is that the intent of this is to be able to provide kind of the staff's understanding of what's going to get presented at the next city council meeting, and this is your opportunity as the city council to look at it and then potentially amend what you want. That allows us time to turn a product, and that by the fall, like this coming Thursday, have that done, and then when we publish on Friday for the citizens, then that's the final version that goes forward. But council can certainly advise you to that better than I can.
Well, that's generally, and it's my understanding that the thought or the hope is that in a study session like this, we will conclude the business we're going to deal with at the next regular meeting and have that as complete as possible. But what I will point out to you, this document right here, which is the agenda, that's the agenda. That's what the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, says that except under very specific circumstances, you cannot add something to this. Now, I've prepared some things that we're going to be sending out, and it's going to be very clear that when you get this, this is the agenda, and it tells you what the items are. But the proposed resolution, I'm trying to do out a copy one, a resolution or ordinance, that is not the agenda. That is, the agenda says you will vote on an ordinance to sell a piece of property. Let's say that's what it is. That's what you have on the agenda, but let's say that you have on the proposed ordinance that you're going to sell it for $128,000. You come to a council meeting, and you as council in public session, you make a determination just exactly what your decision is. And if you should, through a proper amendment to that, say we're going to sell it for $200,000 or $50,000, that can be done. That is not adding something to the agenda. That is council doing their work in public, that you will talk about these things. Now, again, you're going to get, is my understanding, proposed ordinances, proposed resolutions, whatever, in what is considered to be the final form, or what we believe will be final form. But once again, you as the mayor and council are the ones that determine what that ultimate decision is going to be. And the fact that we give you an ordinance or resolution does not mean you can't change that ordinance or resolution. As long as what you're talking about is what was noticed on this agenda to tell the public that this is what we're going to be dealing with. And just going back a little bit, giving you a little history. 15 years ago, this agenda didn't mean much. It was nice to put out, but 15 years ago, and maybe as recent as 10, on the first and third Mondays of every month, council met to handle whatever business they wanted to handle. It did not have to be on an agenda. And there's been some litigation that's changed some of that. And so now it has to be on the agenda unless there are some exceptions. If there's an exigent circumstance that 2/3 of council votes on and says that by 2/3 vote, we need to do this tonight, although it's not on the agenda, you can put it on the agenda and you can vote on it. If it is a matter, and I think this, if it's an ordinance, as I read it, you can add an ordinance to the agenda, vote on it because you have the first vote, and it does not become final at that meeting. The FOIA Act has a provision in it that if it does not become final and there's an opportunity for the citizenry to be advised of it and appear before it becomes final, it can still be done. So I guess what I'm telling you is that I think that there's a way that we're going to try to do it, try to have everything in line in advance, but we're not going to take away council's right to govern and do what they're supposed to do at a public meeting if that is what takes place. And I know that may be a whole lot more than what you were looking for, but I just felt like it's important enough so you know all of the ins and outs of things.
But now this, will we get a draft like this every Monday before the first Monday meeting that we're going to be making decisions? Will this come out to us? Now, if it does, then is it published on the website so people, citizens can see this is what we're doing tonight for next week? Okay.
Kelly, I heard what you were saying about being able, like you used the land for an example.
Yeah.
But wasn't that what the big lawsuit to us was changing an amount? It didn't change the bottom line, but
But see what happened was, you know, and again, we're waiting on that judgment. But in that case, what happened was the court said, yes, this is an agenda, but the other packet that we sent out that had on it agenda complete, the judge in this case said, oh, well, that's still part of your agenda. You've designated it as an agenda, although it does not meet any definition of agenda that we found in anywhere. In our case, that's what it was. Now, so, and I talked for a little bit with Sharon this morning, and I've done some, you're going to have, my proposal is that at the top of your agenda sheet, it's going to say this one-page document is the formal agenda for the regular City of North Augusta council meeting scheduled for the blank day of blank whatever. It's going to be very clear that's the agenda. Then on whatever else we send out, and I don't want it certainly not in the same folder or anything, but on the front of this it's going to say the documentation provided herewith consists of advanced draft materials for review by Mayor and City Council. Such documents may be revised prior to the actual council meeting before any formal consideration of same by Mayor and City Council. And that's saying, well, you may come up with something here, and then between today and Thursday, we got to change something, so we can do that. Said documents may also be revised by way of a proper amendment made at the council meeting. These documents are informational only and not intended to represent the final decision of council. And I think with those things, we're protected, and that takes care of it.
And that backup material will be posted in advance, as has been.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's my understanding backup material is going to be made public too,
Okay.
but it's going to have this disclaimer that nowhere, anywhere close to it is it going to say agenda.
Good.
Yeah. Very good.
thank you.
Councilwoman, does that close out your question? Okay. So I just want to make sure I was straight before I went on. All right, let's go ahead and go to item number 1 for the City Council agenda. Items 1 through 4 are rote, if you will, so the call to order, invocation, roll call, and approval of minutes. So nothing to cover there. And then the next item under new business is under finance, which Cammie will be talking about, the audit review. There's no decision that's required by council in this particular case, but this is an information requirement we have from our auditors associated with the review of our finances within the books. I don't know if Cammie, if you wanted to throw anything on the fire on that one or not, but that's essentially, it's going to be a presentation, an outside presentation to talk about what they saw with the finances of the city. Again, not something that you're required to take a vote on. It's an information brief, just so you have some visibility on the finances of the city as well as the citizens, so they're aware of what's going on as well. Cameo. All right, I got a thumbs up from Cameo. It means that I mostly got that right, so that's good. Any questions from the council on that item? Okay. I'll move to item number 6, which under City Council is the mayor pro tempore selection by council. That's required at the first full council meeting, and so that will be to you all as the council to decide, by vote at the next council meeting. And staff has really no involvement in that other than that's your voting process, and the mayor will run that election, if you will, or selection. Any questions on that? Nothing heard. We'll move to item number 7, which is under zoning, so for planning and development, and that's ordinance number 2021-05 to amend the zoning map of the city of North Augusta, South Carolina, by rezoning plus or minus 51.20 acres of land owned by Aiken County Board of Education, Aiken County tax parcel number 023-05-01-003 from PD Plan Development to P Public Use Ordinance, and this is the first reading. So this is something that came through the Planning Commission, and this is to support the Highland Springs schools that will go in east of 520 on the eastern trace of the city limits. And so this is in partnership with Aiken County Schools, and this is for an elementary school and a middle school. And so in order for them to proceed, that land has to be Zone P for public use. So again, this is a Planning Commission item. Believe they recommended approval for this. And so this is coming to the council. So for our new council members, again, Planning Commission will make a recommendation, but ultimately council is able to approve or disapprove those recommendations. And this will be the first reading of that item at the city council.
So are they gonna start building as soon as this is final from us?
I would assume there's going to be a little bit of a break there, ma'am. I don't have a good construction timeline for you, but
A break, but we've been waiting around here 3 years.
yes, ma'am.
So,
Well, this has to happen in order to move
Okay.
the ball.
all right.
So this is your opportunity to kind of help that process through. But I'll certainly have a discussion with Aiken County Schools just to get a better sense. I know Rachel Moody and I went and met with the school superintendent, King Lawrence, a while back, and we talked through a number of different items at the school district level, and the construction of these 2 buildings was certainly one of the primary topics.
Jim, do we have
Yes,
water?
sir.
Do we have water and sewer in that neighborhood?
So my understanding is, without delving too deep into James's item, is that the answer is yes, and that one of the reasons the placement of the schools at that location had a lot to do with the current utility sightings, which was available in the south end of the tract. But James, if you have something either additive or differential, by all means, throw it out there.
And they will come to it? The school will come to the extension? Okay.
Yeah, so for the folks at home, our public services director said yes, they will. The school will move, to tie into the existing infrastructure for the city.
Thank you, thank you.
Jim, I don't know if this is a you question or a Kelly question. I kind of touched on it last week a little bit. Is there, once this is on P, it's P. Could the school board then turn around and sell it to somebody to construct something else if they decided they didn't want it for a school? Because, the only time we voted something P has been when it's a city project. This is something that's out of our hands, though. Is there, I don't see
You're
any
correct.
contingencies.
Anytime you rezone property, whatever you rezone it to, that's the zoning. Whether it's sold to somebody built by the people that asked for the rezoning, but when you rezone property, you rezone it for whoever owns it in the future.
And that's kind of why I was curious, should we put something in this clause contingent upon them building a school? Because let's just say something comes up and they say, you know what, we don't have the funds, let's sell this land, and next thing you know, they're erecting a water tower or...
And there's a problem with that because that gets into what they call contract zoning that is illegal. Means that you enter into a contract, they say, I'll build this here if you'll zone it this, and
I got you.
that's frowned
I mean,
upon.
I assume the school board is going to go through with it, but it's just one of those, and I understand where you're coming from, and, but that's something to think forward, moving on if we have some people say, well, I want this GC, and then all of a sudden it's not what they, stated it to be. So I didn't know if it worked for the public the same way.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Now, when we passed the sales to Aiken County on that school, Hammond Hills, Belvedere, all that, and this school was included, was the property said we gonna build it here, or was it just we gonna build a new middle and elementary school anywhere? When they, I mean,
I
'cause
think that they discussed that was to be the
the
spot.
spot, okay.
But I don't know whether it's legally tied.
I could just tell you, Councilwoman, that the most recent discussion we had with King Lawrence was that as they looked and they kind of saw what their requirements look like from a school district perspective and where growth was across multiple regions, including North Augusta and county, that was the place that they were most needing to put a school, or at least most prepared to put a school. And so I feel pretty comfortable. I'm not speaking on behalf of Aiken County Superintendent or the schools. But what they've relayed to us at administration is that's where they're putting the mark on the ground to do the next school expansion.
That was part of that original development agreement.
Yes, sir. Any other comments or questions about the zoning for public use for Highland Springs schools? No. And then we'll be going to administrative reports and recognition of visitors and citizens' comments, which is the time for citizens to speak about agenda items, not non-agenda items for city council.
Skipped item 8.
Did I skip 8? Thank you. So item 8 was under Parks, Recreation, and Tourism, which is resolution number 2021-18, accepting gift of gazebo. So we have, Rick Meyer can talk that a little more in depth, but we have a citizen who wanted to make a donation to the city of North Augusta to put a gazebo near the Greenway, near Center Street, near the municipal center. That would be a nice addition in between tying kind of downtown down to Riverside Village for the gazebo project. So Rick, is there anything you'd like to add on what that gazebo looks like? I believe you have some of those materials in your packet.
They have a good idea of location
No, that's what I was going to ask you. Where is that going to be?
Test. Yes, it's on. Okay, the Miss Tina Chugar, a local North Augusta resident, although she just sold her home, she wanted to donate this in honor of her husband who passed away, Dr. Chugar, who loved the Greenway. And this cost that you see in this resolution includes the entire cost, including the manufacturer sending a team down here to construct and put the gazebo up. Cost is also built in for us to put a concrete pad in and sidewalk. Roy Kibler and Carl Walthauer did the work on this. I take no credit other than standing up here in front of you. So they get the credit, but this is all inclusive, and I think you can see where it is. Ms. Chugar kind of picked these folks out. We did price with some other folks to make sure this was good, and what we did find out in pricing is that most of the other prices, that was the total cost, not counting the construction of it. So we feel like we've got a pretty good structure. And I have a picture. I should have made a picture. I'll pass this around to you, and I'll send this to you. And we'll send this picture to you so you get an idea what it looks like. Any questions?
Rick, will there be a, not a monument, but something,
Yes.
his name will be there?
Yes, she
So
would
it's-
like a plaque
yeah,
there.
okay, good.
Yes, to recognize him. Any other questions? Oh.
So we have here is essentially the draft agenda for next week, and the rest of these things are kind of the routine items that go along with that. One thing that was not on the original draft agenda that we would like to put before council to potentially add, hopefully it's an easy one, is a resolution for Public Works. And I know Tom's going to probably cover this in departmental reports, but since we're talking about the agenda, maybe this is the better place to put it, Tom. So if you wanted to talk a little bit about the resolution. I know Sharon sent you all a digital copy of the resolution that Tom Caesar put together for from the Public Works Department. And so if you could talk a little bit about what you're looking to have done, then we'll go ahead and make sure we can get that added to the draft agenda.
Yeah, next week, May 16th through the 22nd, is National Public Works Week, as sponsored by the American Public Works Association. So on behalf of what we call Public Works Department and the Public Services Department, I'm requesting a proclamation to be read proclaiming next week to be Public Works Week in North Augusta.
Any questions?
Mr. Meyer and the council, any objections to us adding that as another agenda item for next week?
I just wanted to say I think it's a great idea, and we'll be excited to support.
Okay. So with that consensus from council, Mr. Mayor and council, we'll go ahead and add that as an agenda item for the city council meeting for next week.
Yes.
Subject to any follow-on questions, that concludes item number 1, which is the city council agenda. And I'll pause for any questions from mayor and council. Hearing none, we're going to move on to the department details. And so what we'll do is have the different directors will come to the microphone and talk again about what's really happening, major items that affect the citizenry and council, so they have some visibility on things that are happening for this particular purpose, between now and the next study session, which is Monday, May 24th. And so with that, we'll start with Cammie Hayes, our finance director, for her start. And then we'll transition over to public services with James Sutton. But first, Cammie.
Okay, we have a Cycle 2 due date next week for utilities, our utility customers. We also have a disconnect cycle that'll run next Tuesday and Wednesday for our Cycle 1 customers. So for those of you that aren't familiar, we do have 2 utility cycles. So we bill one cycle and then collect the following cycle, and it's just on a rotating basis. So our traffic is a little bit heavier every other week in the finance department with our customers. We have begun following up on delinquent tax receipts for tax year 2020. Those were due by May 1 to avoid being in the penalty period. We're also following up on our business licenses that have not been renewed for this year to see if the businesses are still active and if we just need to get them to come in. So those are due by April 30th to avoid penalties. So we are now in penalty period for both business licenses and property taxes. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Cammie, just basic. I know, obviously back during COVID and everything, we were seeing higher numbers of disconnects and those sorts of things. I mean, are we back on pretty much schedule?
We're back on track with our regular schedule.
Just wanted to be sure. Thank you.
Yeah, the online customer number has maintained. We're not seeing as many customers in the office as we did pre-COVID. So our online payments is the only number that stayed elevated.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Cammie.
All right, we'll transition to public services with James Sutton.
Good evening. Just to update council on approval of funding that they made on April the 5th related to a defective wastewater line along the Pole Branch interceptor. That project has been completed and completed under budget. Just to give Mr. McCauley and Mayor Williams enough background on that project, the wastewater line is located between Claremont Drive and 5 Notch Road. That's where the line segment was replaced. It serves the north side of I-20 around Walnut Lane, Butler Mill subdivision, those areas there. Everything went well with the project. It's been re-landscaped and we're complete with it. On new business, next week we'll have utility crews working along Buena Vista Avenue, replacing a defective valve that needs to be isolated in order to realign an offset pipe that's located on Riverside Boulevard that is located in the drainage ditch area that was work recently completed by Mr. Zier's crews. They're gonna go in and hydro-stop the line so that we can isolate the flow and not have to cut off a large area, put a new valve in, and go down and realign the pipe system. And the same on the 18th and the 21st, those 2 days, traffic may be impacted along Buena Vista Avenue. We'll have crews out flagging and construction signs up going east and west. And we ask that pedestrians and traffic be cautious during those times and watch out for our workers and be safe.
James, have you, I would advise contacting North Augusta Elementary because, you know, coming out of there in the afternoon's rough traffic because a lot of them come out the back way onto Buena Vista and Brookside now. So maybe not notify that principal so she'll know.
I'll do so, Ms. Clark.
And I don't know, her name's Patricia Wilson. Well, you know her. Yeah.
Any further questions?
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
We'll transition now to Libby Hodges, our Planning and Development Director.
Good evening. We are going to be having a planning commission meeting May 20th. That's not this coming Thursday, but the next. But the reason I mention it is that we will be issuing that agenda and supplemental materials on this Thursday. This will be the first meeting that we have to discuss. In the study session, we'll be discussing the comprehensive plan update that we're working on. So we're getting moving on that project as well. We have several cases upcoming for the BZA. That agenda will be issued May 27th with the meeting on the following Thursday. We have an RFP that recently completed for the mowing and remediation services for code enforcement. So this would be a contract with a mowing company that would go out and do the mowing if we have a code enforcement case that we can't get the owners to remediate properly. This should help speed us up with some of our remediation, but we still will have to go through the full notification period. So it's always going to be a little bit slow because we have to let everybody know. But just so y'all are aware that that's out there. Hopefully we will be awarding that by the end of this week. Georgia Avenue Traffic Calming Study has made some progress with SCDOT. And I mentioned in here, thank you to Tom. He's really kind of blazed the way for us, getting ready for the Greenway projects. We've been able to kind of piggyback on his applications for the local program administration. We have several other studies that will be going through the same process, so we're going to try to get all of those started and just be ready to roll as soon as we can, as soon as we have a little more capacity in the planning department to run those projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Libby.
Okay. With no questions from the council, we'll move over to Public Safety. Chief John Thomas will give us the update.
Okay, good evening. Sergeant Andy Cook, kind of give you an update on Andy. I know you're probably all aware we've had such a big response to Andy. Andy's in his 4th week in ICU, and is in most part headed down the right direction. We've got some positive news on that, and so I'd ask you to keep Andy and his family in your thoughts and prayers. You probably know there's been several fundraisers around the city. Too many for me to mention, really, because they look like everybody's kind of come on board and helped us with that, and so we're very thankful for the encouragement and the business that supported us during that time. So, Mr. Meyer, I think you recognized us last week. This is National Peace Officer or Police Officer Week here in the city. There's some community events that some of you probably know. Katie Mode. Katie is the sister and a very big advocate for us in public safety, and does a lot for us. A couple things. One is First Baptist Church is going to host a view from the Blue. That's this Sunday. Everyone's invited. I think you'll see that on their Facebook page. Our pastor's going to interview us, meaning me and my wife, about the pandemic and how the challenges that we went through, and kind of talk through some of that. Obviously, all the law enforcement officers are invited with their spouses, and they're having a 10:30 service, and then they'll feed all the police officers and their families on site that particular day. Thursday is another event Katie is sponsoring, is Coffee with an Officer at the Stone Roastery from 7 a.m. to 5. So it gives an opportunity for the community to come out, sit down with a police officer and talk to them about anything in the community they want to talk about, answer some questions. So it's been a great tool for us to get involved or engage with people in our community over a cup of coffee and maybe a Danish. So that's a great thing for us. So there's two things that are happening in the community with Police Officers Week. The other big thing that we're working on is CALIA, which is the national accreditation that we currently have. We're up for reaccreditation. It's taking a lot of work, and we'll see those people on site in June to do our reaccreditation. So we're working very diligently to try to get that accomplished and on time with that on-site visit. The last thing I have is Station 1, which is the fire station, which is up on Martintown Road. We've got approval on the underwater storage has been obtained, and we've got that past us. So the next thing we'll probably look at, obviously, is pouring the footings. And that'll be sometime in the near future. We have weekly meetings with those people on site every Thursday. So Captain Williams and Mark Chostner, who helps the city, is doing that in that regard. Any questions I can answer for you, Eric?
Yes, sir, Chief. Dealing with station, not Station 1, but or Jim, this might be, have we made any headway with the new public safety headquarters, or those prints been finalized? I know you were working with them as well, Chief. So.
We're still in the design phase, Councilman Presnell. So I think it's premature for me to bring you something as of yet, understanding that that's certainly an item that's first and foremost in the minds of the public safety staff, because they're very excited about getting that project moving. So we'll hopefully have an update for you here this summertime.
Okay.
About kind of where we are and kind of what kind of timelines we're looking at. We've really kind of put a lot of our engineering and technical efforts into moving the fire station 1 further along the pike with our partners that are involved in that, because it's the same group of folks from a design perspective that we're doing both projects.
Okay.
But we're going to pivot, as they say, into public safety headquarters here in the near future.
Okay. Yeah, I know everybody's excited, including me, and I know, Chief, you and your staff's probably very excited. So yeah, believe me, it's on my mind too. So I didn't know. Last time we heard, I know we were in the design phase. So I guess there's a lot to think about.
Good. Yes, sir.
The reaccreditation, is that for 5, 6, 7 years?
It's typically for 3 years, but because of the pandemic last year, it was delayed a little bit. So obviously we're catching up. So we'll be good for another 3 years.
Okay,
after June.
Thank you.
And Chief, correct me if I'm wrong here, but just for the new council members, just to keep you all in the loop, there was a news article that ran right when I started here as the city administrator about a number of municipalities and groups inside South Carolina that were not accredited by the state. And so what I wanted to let you know is, voluntarily, Chief Thomas and his crew within public safety, instead of going through a state accreditation, which is a rigorous accreditation, actually are going through federal accreditation, which is actually a higher standard as we go forward. So just as you look at that, if you ever hear, kind of citizen feedback, or if they saw this old news article about, hey, how come you guys are not accredited through the state of South Carolina? We are accredited, but we're federally accredited as we've gone forward. So that was actually missing in that particular news item as that was out there. But Chief's chosen to go with a higher standard or a more rigorous standard, and I'm grateful that we're doing that.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
With that, I'd like to transition over to Rick Meyer for Parks, Recreation, and Tourism.
Exciting news today is the crew from Compan arrived this morning to start work on new playground surface at Riverview Park. We know we'll have lots of happy mothers and children here in a few weeks, and our plans are to be through with this playground surface and reopen the playground and the splash pad by Memorial Weekend. And we should be able to do that provided it doesn't rain for 21 straight days, and I think we'll be in good shape. Also, playground equipment at Creighton Park. We've gone in and done some repair work in that playground and fixed the picnic tables. But we do have an issue with the large piece of equipment, if you're familiar with Creighton Park, and we're waiting on the manufacturer of that product to let us know whether or not we can repair it. And so there's a possibility that it gets repaired. There's a possibility that we have to remove it. So we'll keep you up to speed on that piece of equipment. This weekend, Riverview Park will be the site of South Carolina High School playoffs. North Augusta High School baseball and softball teams will host first-round games, and both games are being played at 1 p.m. Riverview Park will be quite crowded as both teams play at home. In addition to that, there is a travel baseball tournament going on at Tower 1 and Tower 3. So if you're coming to the games, you might want to come early to get your parking spot. And the last thing I have, too, is we're waiting on 6 new Hometown Hero banners. And as soon as we have those, and I'm told we'll have them this week, we'll be installing those in the heart of downtown North Augusta on George Avenue. Any questions?
No questions, but I've got a suggestion.
Okay.
When Miss Aubrey Watson was living many moons ago, I mean, she had snaps in North Augusta. Show North Augusta's prettiest side. And I think this was brought up last week at Summerfield Park. We had a cleanup day last Saturday, a week ago, that we went out and just cleaned the park, picking up paper. So, Rick, I'd like just to suggest maybe one day in North Augusta on a Saturday, every park in North Augusta, be clean. It's in the name of her program was Snaps.
Snaps, great idea.
Show North Augusta's prettiest side. So, just let the citizens get involved, because
I like it.
and you clean up our parks. Because I know that's a lot of work. I know at Riverview Park, trash over there is a lot of work for the employees, so this might help out.
Okay. Great idea, Pat.
Rick, I don't really have a question. I'm not going to ask you about that, but I just wanted to tell you, the dedication ceremony at the amphitheater, the concert, I just want to congratulate you and your staff. Y'all did a great job on it. It was a great show. I'm hoping we can have some more here in the future, but it was awesome, and you and your staff deserve a pat on the back. Y'all did a great job.
We had some help. I'll say that. Our staff, plus we have a committee that included public safety and Kayla Ferguson off of Human Resources, Rachel as well. So we appreciate their help, but thank you, Eric.
Sorry I didn't thank y'all too, but Chief, good job, everybody.
Yep. Thank y'all.
Great job, Rick.
Anything else?
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it. We'll transition over now to Tom Zeser from Engineering Public Works.
Everyone's been very brief. I hope I didn't prepare too much for tonight for you, but apologize. Anyway, I'll start with the Nobcon Sidewalk project. As a refresher to Counsel and for the benefit of the new members, this is a project for which we received a Transportation Alternatives Program grant. It's to install a sidewalk on Nobcon Avenue from Pisgah, right near Paul Knox Middle School, down to the high school entrance road. And it also will be adjacent to Colonel Leroy Hammond Park. And so we received our executed participation agreement and formal notice to proceed from SCDOT on May 5th. We've submitted preliminary plans to the DOT on May 3rd for their review. We did receive a executed slope permission from the Aiken County Public School District on April 20th. That's to allow us to do grading work adjacent to Paul Knox School. We advertised today RFQs for environmental permitting and construction inspection services for that project. Those proposals are due on June 1st. And we anticipate construction to begin at this point. It likely won't begin until August, with completion by the end of October this year. Again, as a reminder, this is a project is estimated to cost about $350,000. Of that, $280,000 is grant from SCDOT, and the remainder is a match from the Street Improvement Fund in the city budget. Any questions on that project?
Tom, and you may have said this in the beginning, but how far down Nobcon going towards the stadium? Does it go in front of the stadium up to like where the or does it stop where the sidewalk cuts over?
At the entrance road. I think they
Okay,
yeah,
and just missed that. Okay,
correct.
thank you.
The other project is also a TAP grant project. It's for a Greenway Extension. This is a very minor extension, but it hopefully will be a well-used piece. It's to extend the Greenway from the current end at Woodstone Subdivision out to Mayfield Drive. And this is the piece that was procured by North Augusta Forward and gifted to the city for that extension. Again, we received our participation agreement and notice to proceed from the DOT on May 5th. We also, the RFQs for the environmental permitting and construction inspection are included in the ad that went out today. We issued a contract for surveying services for that project, and that is underway. That project we anticipate to begin construction in October, completed by the end of December. Weather could be a factor. The DOT has limitations. That project will involve some asphalt paving, and they have limitations on when we can do certain activities like paving, so that could cause some delay. That project is, I don't have the exact amount estimate, but it's just under $100,000 estimated. Of that, up to about $80,000 is grant. The remainder is will be funded out of sales tax 3. Any questions on that project? Moving on to the downtown Greenway connector. Call them preliminary final plans are ready for presentation to council. I say they're preliminary because they're still subject to any modifications or changes that you all would like to suggest. Our consultant is working to address SCDOT encroachment permit review comments. They received a number of comments that they're working through. They are also preparing easement documents. We do need a few easements from the adjacent property owners to do some grading behind the greenway. And again, I'm hoping to make a presentation of that full project to the City Council at a upcoming meeting in the very near future. And as part of that presentation, we will have the final construction cost estimate, and so we can discuss budget funds available and projected or suggested funding options.
Yeah, for the city council, I would say that the earliest obviously would be the May 24 study session. That may drag into the first study session in June, depending on, how comfortable we feel based on the overall pricing, to make sure that's good. And after we get through the staff, churn on that. But that should be something coming to you all here in the near future. And Tom's done a great job here with engineering to get us to a point to be able to have a presentation and have this for open discussion with, council and citizens.
Tom, was the, if I remember correctly, because it's been a while since, we looked at the conceptual plan, wasn't a lot of that funded by South Carolina DOT, or was there a portion in there, if I remember correctly? Am I just...
No, there's no identified funding from SCDOT. I mean, we have, we receive an annual allocation of C funds.
Okay.
That if council elects, we could devote those C funds to this project. It's eligible to be done with that money. But
okay.
It's not, we haven't specifically identified that yet.
Okay, thanks.
That'll be part of the presentation, Councilman, as well. Just these are the funding possible mechanisms. It's like anything else. We've got to balance what we fund. If we fund this with C funds and we're not funding a number of other things with, you know, the kind of road projects by doing it that way. So the staff's got to kind of help delineate between what do we think are the most likely funding options as we go forward on that.
Yeah, and Tom, also, thank you for getting that hump and wood lawn right near the school fixed. That I still brace myself every time I go there, and I'm like, oh, it's been fixed. Thank y'all, you and your staff. Thank you.
Sure. And lastly, I know some of you get beat up publicly about the flag on top of this building, and I don't know what to say, but we have published another request for proposals from anyone who may be interested in providing annual service to that mechanism up there. I did that. I tried this about 2 years ago and got no responses. So I'm trying again, and I have advertised this in the SCIBO, or the South Carolina Business Opportunities publication, so that will reach, that'll be statewide, so we'll see. Maybe I'll get some.
Well, didn't we talk about putting the flag in front of the building, like coming down George Avenue?
That was one of the proposals that we made.
I mean, looks to me that would be a lot better than up on top of this building, and it looking raggedy after so many years. So,
what
happened? Why did we not? Do
Councilwoman, I
anything?
think it came down to, you know, there was no funding mechanism available for us because there's a decent amount of cost to any possible outcome. So whether we amend the current infrastructure and architecture of this building to allow us to have, you know, residual access to the flagpole, which we don't currently have, that's a heavy lift. We've certainly looked at some other options, and if you look at the Aiken County Government Center, they have a very similar setup where they've got, you know, what appears to be a flagpole on their building, but they actually have their flags out in front of the building. That's something that we've looked at as well with Tom's team, but ultimately came down to this last year with kind of the COVID restrictions from a budgetary perspective. We just had no throughput to be able to pursue that. So as we go forward into this next budget cycle, that's certainly something we can put on the table and have a discussion about through whether that gets funded through general fund or if there's other options for us about how we can move forward on that. But I'm with you. You know, I'd like to see the national colors displayed for, you know, in a government facility.
You know, going back, the history of it, as I recall, the design had the flags on the front of the building. The iron workers completed their work and put their American flag on the top.
Yeah.
And they started getting calls, the mayor did, we need a flag on top of the building. And that's how it came about.
So basically, it was an afterthought. It was never designed to have one up there, because there are people that are like, well, I don't understand. And Tom, I've seen some pictures. I mean, you got to get up on top of there with an extension ladder just to get to the flagpole. I can imagine why you can't find anybody. But it was, I mean,
it's a real daredevil to get up there, Councilman. It's a whole.
Oh yeah,
it's a whole thing.
Well, just for the folks watching, you know, I'm sure there's people tuned in, you know, because that is a complaint we hear. Well, I don't understand why. Well, it was an afterthought, and it was just thrown in without thinking about how are we going to maintain it. So, you know, maybe that's something we need to look at. I don't disagree.
And just the flag, it's operable now. The issue is that the U.S. flag had a new one installed at a very expensive cost to the city, and then it very quickly, the mechanism relies on a string to hold the flag onto the lanyard, halyard, and the string quickly became detached. They went up there and replaced it, and it became detached again. So it's, you know, we get complaints that it's disrespectful to not fly a flag. Well, it's what's disrespectful is to fly a flag that is not properly
That's right.
flown.
Correct.
And so we're better off not flying it at all than to fly it in a damaged state, in my opinion.
Miss Pat, it was almost exactly a year ago that we had the Boudreaux Group, the architect of the building, put together some proposals for us. I did email that to council at the time. It was just before the pandemic really got underway. So we even put it out, almost positive we put it out publicly to get input as well. I have to double check, but we can resend the proposals. If you recall, they ranged from 40,000 to 100,000 in total. Because it's more than just putting the
Putting a
flagpole
pole
on
and
the
a
ground. We
flag,
have to
yeah.
address, right, the infrastructure.
But I think we
on the
should
roof.
look at that again.
That was one of the options, putting them off of the balcony as well. But like I said, since they are the architects of the building, you know, the pricing might be
Yeah.
look different a year later,
Lot
especially.
different.
Right, but the proposal, you know, would still be
Yeah.
valid in the design.
All right, Tom, thank you. Any other questions from council? All right, I'll move over to J.D. McCauley from HR.
Good afternoon, Council. I just have a few updates. Just wanted to let you guys know about some of our open positions. This is kind of my external facing version of HR is our positions that we advertise. Most of the things I do are internally facing. But so we have finance manager working with Cammie is open. A grounds worker 2 with Roy Kibler, who's in James' area, is open. A firefighter and public safety works for Captain Williams is open. A utility worker 1 working for Ryan Metz, also in James' area, is open. We update these every Friday on our website, and we advertise in various places to make sure we reach the intended audience for each position. This Friday we'll start advertising for a public safety officer as well. We also have some position spotlight videos that we try to highlight our workers in action. If you haven't seen them, please take a look at those. We had a local Atomic Studios here in North Augusta produce those for us. That's all I have for council this afternoon.
I actually saw one of those videos and thought it was really good, and like really, I saw it come through on Facebook, and I just was very impressed with it.
Thank you. They did a good job. Employees did a great job.
Can we ask the finance manager, did somebody leave, or was that
It's definitely not a new position because you would be approving that.
right.
That Carly Paget has put in her notice. Carly Paget,
Oh,
our
okay.
finance manager, has put in her notice. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, JD. And under administration, I'll just go through a couple quick items and we'll move on to our next thing. So there's a blood drive for the American Red Cross at the North Augusta Community Center here on Wednesday from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. So I'd invite any of you that have not yet signed up, whether it's council member, staff, or citizens, happy to participate in that. And I've got my appointment at 11, I think 30, so look forward to seeing some other folks on the bench with me as you go forward. Public safety already covered the coffee with officers, so thanks, Chief, for covering that. Also on Thursday is the North Augusta Chamber State of the Community presentation at the Crowne Plaza from 11:30 to 1 p.m. And so the speaker panel will include folks in the community. So it'll be Colonel Shaw Pick from Fort Gordon, Mr. Odie Donald, who is the city administrator for the city of Augusta, Clay Killian from Aiken County, and myself will all be panel members, talk about just the state of the community here within, in and around North Augusta. And then last but not least, our next city council meeting will be scheduled for 6 p.m. on Monday, the 17th of May. And I say that, if we have consensus of mayor and council for that. So previously we've had study sessions prior to the council meetings themselves. So you have a study session at 6 leading into a 7 p.m. Council meeting. If we're not going to have a study session leading into the council meeting, the feeling among staff and a few folks I've talked to would be it'd be preferable to press through and start earlier as opposed to starting at 7 p.m. So our preference would be able to do that at 6 p.m. next week. But I ask you as the council for your consensus to see if we may proceed in that direction.
Go for it.
Okay, 6 p.m. it is.
Jim, if I could, and I was very happy to hear you say that today because I think it's a great idea. But I did a little research, and I just one sentence ahead of where the FOIA tells you about the agenda. It says all public bodies must give written public notice of their regular meetings at the beginning of each calendar year. The notice must include the dates, times, and places of such meetings. Now, it would appear to me it's very, very reasonable that as long as we provide the proper notice that we can switch those. But I'm hesitant anymore to say that any law can be interpreted reasonably. I think that, I mean, I just can't see how it would be a major problem, but Sharon, we'd have to see all of any of the media people that we send to, that we would have to get that notice, written notice out to them showing that change. And I would not expect that to be a problem unless we have someone that, not on this group, that doesn't like the ideas of meeting at 6. But I'm not recommending we don't do it, but I just feel like I have to bring that to your attention and what we need to do to prepare for it.
Kelly, if you'd be so good then to help us prepare a, the legal change document, and, then we'll work it through staff to be able to get that out to the media outlets and then also in the public, websites and just all of our public-facing items, so we can do that. But any assistance you can provide for us would certainly be appreciated.
And I apologize for not telling you earlier. I heard that this morning, and then this afternoon I was thinking, I said, I know we have to give some notices, and I wondered if time was included in there, and it is, but I think we should be able to do it.
Kelly, is that something we could change by voting? We have a new, mayor and council person. You said at the beginning of every year, but is that something that we could change by some kind of vote?
No, what I'm telling you is this is the state statute that says that each public body has to give that notice. So we don't have any control over it, and it's still, we have to give the notice, but it doesn't say anything about if you want to change the time, or that you can't change it or you can do it. But I think we deal with it in a reasonable manner, and maybe reason will win out somewhere along the way.
I was just wondering, can we just amend I guess we had a resolution earlier to
No, I don't
accept
think,
those
we don't do
dates,
it by
or we don't do
resolution, I don't
Remember,
think.
the mayor, the last 2 years, Mayor Pettit sent us in January a list of everything. Was that part of that?
That's what has been sent out.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
the notice that we
Okay.
give.
So, I mean, is that something we could amend?
Well,
on
that's
those
what we
dates?
say
Yeah.
we're going to amend.
Okay.
We're going to send an amended document of that out to everybody that other went to.
So what Jim's gonna do, he's got what he needs, a consensus from us. He will work with Mr. Zier, and we will do what we need to do at that point.
But we still plan on doing that starting the 17th. Does that give us enough time to go through that entire process, make proper notifications, make sure we're on?
Kelly can work fast.
Okay.
Kelly can work fast.
Okay. I mean, I love the idea of doing it, but I don't want us to run afoul of anything.
Same document we sent before, other we're changing the time.
Yep.
That's the only thing. Okay, I think, I don't see where in this statute, and I'd have to spend a little more time, but I don't think where it says that it has to be published. It just says the notice has to be given. So, we'll just give it everywhere we possibly can.
Got that, Miguel?
All right, sir, I think that covers item 2 under department details. So I will turn item 3 back to Mayor Williams.
We want to be an advocate for this city to our citizens. And when we know the things y'all are doing, we can be that advocate for you. And I think you got that. Hopefully you got that feedback tonight. I think the second thing it does is for the citizens, now that we're streaming this, I think a lot of the questions that get thrown out there can be answered. So I really hope more and more citizens will pay attention to study sessions, because what y'all presented tonight is useful information. It's good information for citizens. So I commend each of y'all. Thank you for taking your time to do that. It's very helpful. Okay, I'm going to kind of lead into this with just if you've heard this story, humor me, but there kind of leads into some of the things I want to talk about. I know a story about the little girl. Her mother, her grandmother, and great-grandmother were all living. And the little girl noticed her mama, every time she did the turkey, she cut a couple inches off the turkey before she put it in the pan. And she really couldn't understand that. So she said, Mama, why do you do that? And the mother goes, well, honey, your grandmother, she has always done that. It just makes it the best turkey. So the little girl goes to her grandmother and said, Grandmama, Mama says that every time that you did a turkey, you'd always cut a couple of inches off before you put it in the big pan. She goes, yes, I tell you what, my mama taught me that. Little girl, she picked up the phone, called her great-grandmama at the nursing home and said, Grandmama and Mama both said that they always cut a couple inches of the turkey off before they put it in their pan. I just don't really understand. She goes, oh, little Susie, you know I was raising those children in the Depression. We were poor, and we only had one small pan, and I had to cut off 2 inches to put that turkey on it. Okay? So I share that to say that, you know what, just because we have done something one way doesn't always mean it's the best way. So you've heard a number of things already with the study session, with some things that have been added tonight by staff, and what we're going to go through with the time change. And so again, we don't always need to do things the same way if we can do them better, and that's really the mindset that I have. And that's the mindset I think council is excited about, and hopefully everybody will. So, a couple points I have. Jim took care of the first one. The second one is just another reminder that our first public power hour will be 1 hour before the June 7th council meeting. So that will be at 5 p.m., okay? We will have procedures in place next week along with a graphic that you can share on social media. So we want to start getting that graphic out. And again, this is an opportunity to hear citizens' concerns and for them to find out information they may not know. And hopefully if they're listening here tonight, they will get a lot of that information. So that's two. The third thing is I will do my verse blog this week, and that's going to be nothing more than an opportunity to highlight some key points of what we're talking about tonight. And that, again, will be something we can share on social media, because the reality is people are not always going to watch the study session. They're not always going to come to city council meetings. And if we can begin to use social media in a right way and as highlight Cliff Note version, and that will be something I'll be working with Ricky on this week to get out. Fourth thing is we're going to have our first Meet the Mayor event, which will be next Thursday, May the 20th, and that's the third Thursday event. And what I would like council to be involved in however it fits your schedule. But the idea, ideally, if we get as much council participation as possible, would be to break into teams of 2. And what I'd like to do is visit the merchants who are participating in the third Thursday event. And that allows us an opportunity to thank them for their business and their investment in our community. And I kind of want to give you, and we will give you a breakdown of, based on the teams we have, what merchants would fall on your team, as well as some bullet points to cover. And just to kind of let people know, just so you can understand who's participating, I think it's pretty amazing. So these are the local businesses in this community that participate on third Thursday. The Arts and Heritage Center, Davenport House, they're now using that for used earth, so a lot of ceramic projects. It's amazing what that group is doing out of that place. North Augusta Feed and Seed, Sheila's Baking, Talkie Jr., AR Workshop, Your Pie, Gary's Hamburgers, 10 Pennies Cottage, Pink Dipper, Vampire Penguin, Zach's Pizza, First Baptist Church. The churches now, First Baptist and Grace, are going to be rotating this. So we've got our churches involved in the downtown, and I think they're going to be tied in with the blood drive, so that's awesome. High Cotton, Antonio's, UPS Store, Morris Creations and Dancewear, Impressions of the South, Shop 3130, Jaham Salon, and Snowcap, and they've added 2 for this one, Shannon Rollins Real Estate, and a new business called The Collective. It's a shared space business, so we now have a shared space business as an incubator for businesses to be able to use that space, and they're going to participate. So I think for our citizens, you know, they need to be aware of the great events and the great businesses that are available from 5 to 8 p.m. next Thursday, the 20th. And like I said, I would like as much council participation as possible. I'll get you that information. We'll get that to you before then. But anyway, I think it's going to be really important, and we'll be able to carry that over into other areas as well. So any questions from council?
Will we meet, like, all meet in certain areas, or like you said, we're going to
Good question. I think depending on how, I got to think through a few logistics, but I want it to be flexible. So, for example, if the team is flexible and they say, hey, for me, maybe we want to do ours from 5 to 6. Another team may say, hey, by the way, I will do mine from 7 to 8. So I'm going to really leave it up to y'all. Yes, ma'am. We'll have a little write-up for you. It's just a couple points. Here's the bottom line. The reality is you may not have a chance to talk to the managers and the business owners because they're so busy. And that's really what we want, right? But they need to know that council is thanking them. So any other questions from council on that? Okay. The second Meet the Mayor event will be in June, and the goal is to have it somewhere on the east side of town. I've already asked Councilman McGee and Councilwoman Carpenter. They're going to help me spearhead that. So as we work through that, we will be able to get you more information, but that will be our second Meet the Mayor event. It will not, no ma'am. It will be totally varied. Good question, it'll be random. Six, just like we're doing with staff reports upcoming each 2 weeks, I want to do the same thing with this 100-day plan. So this will be an item on the study session for the next 100 days. So as we've highlighted some things tonight that got us here. In 2 weeks, I hope to have some things that we've talked about, the announce and move forward then. So we're going to just put that as part of it. And again, I just reiterate again, Chief Thomas, May the 9th through 14th this week is National Law Enforcement Week. And we're blessed to have strong public safety department, and I thank Chief Thomas and his folks for what they are doing. Unless council has any other questions off of that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Clifford.
I had a question.
Yes, sir.
Where does the chamber fall in play with any of those events? The North Augusta Chamber with the third Thursday or the other Meet the Mayor events? How's that
Great
fall?
question. So the third Thursday is an event that is sponsored by the Merchants Alliance, and there are about 30 downtown businesses. So the chamber is not, they're allowed to participate, but that's driven more by the Merchants Alliance, which is one of the initiatives from the Main Street group. Where the chamber is going to come in play, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about later, will be helping us when we talk about Meet the Mayor in different areas. So to answer your question, if this event of us recognizing businesses on third Thursday is a success, guess what? Why can't we do that on Exit 5? Why can't we do it? So to answer your question, the chamber is going to be a big help of helping us with the Meet the Mayor events when we get away from downtown, and any situations where we're going to tie in other businesses. So I've talked to Tara about some of that.
Okay. Well, I'm just confused because I didn't really understand why we have a business alliance outside of the North Augusta Chamber and why those two aren't in a big circle. I just never understood it.
Forward started the business alliance.
Well, why is it in correlation with the chamber? I just don't understand.
Great question. So here's how that played out. When the city was chosen to be one of the communities in South Carolina as part of the Main Street program, within the Main Street program, one of the initiatives that came out of that was, okay, we want to focus on the downtown. So that was driven by the Main Street piece that came off of North Augusta forward. And it does not take away from the chamber. Most of the Merchants Alliance that I named are part of the chamber. As a matter of fact, I will tell you, Jenny at Shop 3130, because of what she's done with her business, Carol at the chamber has asked her to spearhead an initiative for the businesses in the chamber. So the chamber and Merchants Alliance are not in competition. The Merchants Alliance is a select number of merchants in a geographical area downtown, which is part of the Main Street initiative. The chamber does have businesses in downtown that are not part of the Merchants Alliance, and there are some that are part of the Merchants Alliance. So the chamber's focus is really they're folks with their businesses on the downtown, but they cover the full spectrum of the city. So the downtown or the Merchants Alliance is strictly for downtown businesses. But most of these businesses that I named are also members of the chamber. So 2 different organizations with 2 different goals as far as what they're trying to do. That's a great question.
But I will say, Britton,
Yes, ma'am.
I have heard some businesses say downtown, they were not included on the original letter that was going out to small businesses. And I did talk to Avery about that, because I said, you cannot choose and pick who you want to be part of your downtown stuff. So, we might need to spread that on, that every business up and down Georgia Avenue, and I don't know West, because we've got West Avenue, if everybody's included. Are y'all included on that? Yeah, right, that's what's, yeah, right, But I think we should get in touch with them, that every business needs to be included.
Well,
Okay?
I think that's a good
I mean,
point.
I don't want, I'm not throwing
you
rocks,
can't make anybody join.
No,
So-
but they were not, see, the original was a letter, was people were individually invited to join it.
I think initially you're absolutely right. There was
So-
probably a gap that's been several years. So I think there has been for example, the one I just told you about, this perfect example, Shannon Rollins Realty, they chose for the first time to participate.
Right.
So I think,
Well, yeah,
again, there were some pieces of that in the beginning. You're absolutely right. I know there were a number of businesses I've talked to. You're right. But I believe it's forming now, and that group is doing a better job. And I'm going to be meeting with them, talking to them actually tomorrow. So I will bring that
They
up.
might want to send letters to everybody. That way no business is left out. But I had one ask me that, because since First Baptist is participating, somebody had a business and said they didn't know anything about Third Friday. Third Thursday, yeah, so. But
Again, yes, I think we've got to get the word out. I'll tell you, the perfect example is I had one of the managers at the new paint store on corner of West.
West, yeah.
And I did not know about Third Thursday.
Yeah.
I told her about it, and she's already been to 2 meetings.
Yeah.
And real excited about it. So, anyway, that's a real good point. I will bring that out.
That, Britton, when we talked about using the alleyways, one of my big beef on that is you've got to involve those small businesses to say, yeah, we all excited about one day making the alley. I know that's off the subject here, but I think that would make the business a little more exciting when that time comes forward.
Yes, I can assure you, we will communicate. Yes, thank you, but I promise. I will promise we will.
Mr.
We will
Mayor.
get the word out. I can assure you of that, I promise. Yes, sir.
I like the direction where this is going, involving businesses. And when you said, hey, why not do exit 5? Why not do, the east side of Martintown Road? Something I thought about you might want to maybe we can get with Tara with and expand on that would be the guys that aren't brick and mortar stores. I have all the time, do you know a plumber? Do you know a heat and air guy, a contractor, pool person? And I'm sure Tara has plenty of members. Maybe we could do something, meet the mayor with those kind of people who don't have, brick and mortar stores. Just something to think about. I know most auto mechanics have a place to go, but most people that do services in the business, maybe that's a way to reach out as well too, instead of, bring the people together to meet your local guys in town that service this area. And, Tara does, have several, people of that sort, handymen, whatever.
That's a great idea. And I will tell you, I spoke to Tara about this during the campaign, and how the importance, because the chamber has to be a vital role in what we're talking about. And I think she's excited about that. So, yes, thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate that. Good comments, everybody. Thank you. Anything else before I turn over back to Jim? All right, it's all yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. So the intent for this presentation here really is an educational one. I know you've seen some things in the news about the American Rescue Plan, which is a very large bill that's gone through and provides a lot of different avenues of relief to a number of different elements. What I'm really going to focus on is, what that means for the city of North Augusta, or what it could mean for the city of North Augusta as we go forward. Understand that the Department of Treasury just put initial guidance out today at approximately 3 p.m. That was a 151-page document, and so obviously I'm not in a position to provide the analysis of that document here, 3 hours later. But I'm going to give you what we have is just an initial look at what we think this is for the city and what it's not, and also to talk a little bit about and how we're kind of looking at things. So first, we'll go to the first slide if we could. So this is the background, which the American Rescue Plan became law earlier this year. And so we're focused tonight really on local government funding. There's a lot of aspects of this bill. There's a restaurant restoration fund. There's a number of things that affect small business. And really, I know Tara Carroll at the Chamber and a number of other business organizations are working on getting that information out through their channels. But I wanted to focus tonight on what is coming out for local government funding, which is what's concerning us right now. So the ARP provides $350 billion to state, local, and say tribal governments like Native American tribes. And so within that $350 billion, 130 is allocated strictly for local governments, of which we're one. And what you'll see here on the next bullet is that the city of North Augusta is estimated to receive $8.91 million. That is not finalized by the Treasury. What Treasury published today just started coming out that laid out what the counties are going to receive. The city of North Augusta has not received the official piece of that, but our planning assumption is it's going to be somewhere in that ballpark or very close to it. And that those funds, when released, will actually come in two tranches or two waves, if you will. And the first piece of that funding, 50%, is going to arrive this year, and we think sometime before the 1st of September. And then there has to be no earlier than 1 year between those disbursements, and then we'll get the second disbursement of the other 50% going forward. And so the flow of funding is going to be the federal government's going to release it to the state of South Carolina, and they'll in turn turn it over to us. And our understanding or reading of this is unlike other fund sources. There's no tax or haircut, if you will, on this funding as it goes through other echelons of government. It's going to be, if in fact North Augusta is listed for $8.91 million, that's what should come to the city as it goes down there.
How do they determine what each city gets?
Some of this has to do with census data, and it also has to do with other money that's already gone to CBDG grants. Okay. So, for example, the city of Aiken appears not to have as much as the city of North Augusta does, but that's because it already received a CBDG wedge, if you will, of funding. So when you add those two together, it gets a more realistic view of what they're getting from federal sources. So since we didn't get any CBDG grants or disbursements from the federal government, we're getting ours all through the American Rescue Plan, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. So again, our guidance is preliminary and subject to change. They just published 151 pages today, so we'll unpack that and see what that looks like as we go forward. Next slide. So just a couple things so you all know what we can and cannot do with this. First is we cannot use this funding to directly or indirectly offset tax reductions. Basically, you cannot use this to do a tax cut to the citizens. You can't use it to delay a tax or to delay a tax increase. And that's specifically spelled out in the documents we received to date. We can also not use these funds for any pension funds. For our particular city, that's not a big concern. Running our own pension fund, we're obviously part of South Carolina PIBA, but we can't use funds in that kind of way. And lastly, and probably most importantly for us, is those funds have to be obligated by the end of the year in 2024. So we can't just sit, we can't sit on that money in escrow. You can't hold that money for future projects beyond 2024. It has to be executed, obligated by December 31st of that year. Next slide. I think so. Yes, ma'am. So we've been in a number of governmental and intergovernmental agreements or updates from a variety of sources. So I would tell you that Rachel Moody and myself, along with Cami Hayes from Finance, have sat in a number of hosted events from MASC, the Municipal Association of South Carolina, ICMA, the International City Manager Association, and also GFOA, the Government Finance Officer Association. And so we've got a number of organizations that are helping us unpack, as they are with all municipalities and cities, about what this really means and what those rules are. And so broadly, those are the four categories that you can see that are on the screen. I'm not going to read them all to you. And you can see that there's investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure, and the actual document that got published today actually even further refines what infrastructure looks like. So we initially thought that infrastructure, when they say infrastructure, a lot of us move right into kind of roads and bridges, but this money is not for that. I think there's some other acts that are going to potentially go through Congress that may get after transportation requirements, but that's not what this ARP money looks like it's for. It does look like it's for water, sewer, broadband infrastructure when they talk about infrastructure. It also talks about a number of other things on there. Talks about refilling your coffers from a revenue replenishment model. And in very basic terms, when I talk about revenue replenishment, that's the city of North Augusta receive, and we'll just pick one category. So let's talk H tax or hospitality tax. If in 2019 the city received this level of hospitality tax, and in 2020 during the pandemic the city received this lower level of hospitality tax, that you can use this money to basically fund the delta between the two, because that's going to be considered lost tax revenue, and that's a very easy argument to make, because you can show in a very linear fashion, this is our tax base this year, and this is the lower tax base the next year in a COVID environment. I'll go to the next slide. So GFOA is an important organization for us, because again, they talk about how governments are audited and how they are accountable for their funding and the taxpayer funding. And so a couple things that are really to highlight based on this slide. And so I'll let you read through it, and they're going to look at and say a few things. One, if you look at the third bullet, it talks about investment in critical infrastructure because it's non-recurring and can be targeted to long-term assets. And also that helps out with the overall financial health of the city. And to put it in very basic terms, GFOA and a number of other organizations, along with the city's bondholders, are going to look at the spending patterns of the cities that receive this ARP funding to see what they do with it. And do we spend that money in a responsible way, or do we not spend that money in a responsible way? And infrastructure is one of those areas that you're going to see us really hone in on early for the first tranche of funding, because that is easily defensible from a city perspective. And also we have a lot of large infrastructure bills coming our way. If you look at our CPST 4, you can see there's a decent amount of funding that's set aside for wastewater projects. And even with that, that's still just scratching the surface of some of the infrastructure costs that we have coming our way. So again, and also what it talks about is not starting a new program or add-on program that has to be then sustained with other dollars outside of the ARP funding. Next slide. So these are some very early city staff assumptions. So the first is, we believe that our first assumption is that the $8.91 million that has been put out as an estimate is probably fairly close to what we think we're going to get. It may not be exact, but it'll be somewhere in that ballpark based on the information we have at this time. We also estimate that we'd get our first 50% of funding sometime before 1 September. The county is also going to receive, both Aiken and Edgefield counties are also going to receive ARP funding. And so it's certainly feasible for us to have discussions with the county leadership about where we can potentially partner with them on some of the projects that they're doing. That having been said, I don't believe that should be part of the city's base spending plan with ARP funding. So we'll look for opportunities to partner with Aiken and Edgefield counties, and some examples really would probably be in infrastructure and wastewater in particular. But ultimately, we shouldn't necessarily use that as the linchpin of any plan that we put together. We should make sure that we're meeting our requirements based off of North Augusta's ARP funding as that arrives, and then see where we can potentially partner with the county. And then again, last item on there is the final guidelines for expenditures are forthcoming in May, and we got a big tranche of guidelines this afternoon, and I'm not even sure if that's the final set of guidelines or if that's just the first round of updates that we got from Treasury. But the information I'm presenting tonight is based off the very initial guidance we got from Treasury. So based on that, and I understand this is not a decision brief, we're not asking for you all to hit the gavel and make a decision on things, but I would tell you that our initial recommendations as we look at this is the number one priority for us ought to be, for the first tranche, ought to be revenue replacement. So all the tax dollars that did not come to the city of North Augusta last year that we can use with revenue replacement through ARP funding would certainly be a good thing. And quite frankly, if you listen to community leaders across the river and on this side here in South Carolina, most of them are saying the same thing, because quite frankly, they're all being advised in the same way that we're being advised through the state level government associations, the ICMAs and the GFOAs, about that's something you want to do, and that's also good for the city's bond rating as you go forward, as we take a good look at this. And then the other item on there is infrastructure needs. We really want to start lining out for you infrastructure requirements that are quote unquote shovel ready, something that we can put immediately into the hopper and start executing. And so again, money is not just sitting out there waiting to be executed. It's something that can have a very tangible effect on the citizens of the city in a very short amount of time. And so those are going to be kind of the two things we're going to come up with early as far as how we think we ought to take a hard look at the first tranche of money. We're not going to fully recommend all of the first tranche of money to go to those two priorities, but that will likely eat up a good chunk of it with some discretionary funding for the council to consider also. So those are the ones we're looking at, which also involves the one-time expenditures. For the second tranche of funding, which would come in 2022, we have some additional time to really chew on that and figure out what we want that to look like at a council level. And so I think there will still be infrastructure requirements for that, but I think we've got some discretionary funding that can be used that the council can really more fully weigh in on as far as kind of getting your understanding of how the bill is read, and that if you've got specific things you would like to see us start to analyze, that we can do so. So we've got some time to execute the second tranche, but we're going to have to come out of the gate pretty quickly with the first tranche of funding to see how that goes. I'd also tell you that we have not made any arrangements. We have not entered into any contracts, nor have we made any spending arrangements based on this ARP funding. So there's no agreement that's been reached, because again, this is all estimated funding. So we have not obligated the city to anything that would put us in trouble, quite frankly, with the federal government. Nor do we have any other agreements in place with any other governmental organizations on how that ought to be spent. So just to put your minds at ease and the taxpayers at ease, we don't have a plan that's already been executed and just hoping for a thumbs up later down the road. This is waiting to see what that funding looks like. And again, our actual expenditures should be based on the final guidance issued by the U.S. Treasury, because we're accountable. That money can be audited, and we have to make sure that we're spending it in a way that we can account for every dollar and that it lines up within the intent of the bill as published, because it's law. Next slide, please. So that's very down and dirty and very brief, but I wanted to make sure, again, you've seen it in the news about the American Rescue Plan, the initial look that we have here at the city of what that looks like. And so if I could leave you with two things, revenue replacement and infrastructure spending will probably be very heavy recommendations in the first tranche of spending that we get this summer, but ultimately that decision lies with you as the council. We'll make a recommendation, but you are the approvers or disapprovers of any of those funds.
Now, will there be any confusion with all the state roads and city roads? Because, I mean, people, because that's been a big, on the campaign trail, our infrastructure. And, a lot of times I have to say, well, that's a state road. That's not a city of North Augusta. And I know we talked about that one time. If we start sort of taking over repairing and doing, then they might say, well, y'all just take that road. Then, so is that going to be a problem?
Well, ma'am, that is a valid concern about, once the city starts taking over a road, then you've got that problem. However, my reading of this bill is that transportation funding, so any pavement, asphalt, road repair is not included in this bill. And so I suspect that you're not going to see any recommendations from the staff that would involve transportation requests, for this, because when they're very specific in their language in the bill about infrastructure and the definition of infrastructure, and roads and bridges are not listed as infrastructure in this bill based on our reading of it at this time.
So Jim, it sounds to me like probably the first thing is to replenish what we were lacking, And then I guess it's really up to James at this point to determine, because it sounds like it's everything with his department, with water, sewer. If I'm reading all of this correctly, that's the infrastructure they're talking about: water, sewer, that sort of thing. I mean, is there any other projects like Parks and Rec or public safety could take advantage of this that y'all have seen?
So James and Tom are already re-looking, if you will, kind of the infrastructure requirements for the city. We don't have a finalized list for you to tell you, like, this is what we want to put this money into, but just we're broadly looking at the categories as they're laid out for there. There are very few things that I can think that we can apply against public safety. In my current reading of the bill, I can't use this money to say buy fire apparatus. That's not what is outlined cleanly in the bill, at least based on the way that we read it today. And there is some potential provisions within the Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Department because tourism is part of the line item, if you will, in the way that the bill is structured. Okay. So what does that look like? That could look like a couple different things, quite frankly. And so as we look at, infrastructure and tourism, and does Greenway equal tourism? Does a number of things with Parks and Rec equal tourism? I would argue yes, but ultimately I have to make sure that we have to have a legal finding that says, yep, you're good to go. That these things will be pass the smell test as far as what will pass with the federal government in an audit, and we can go forward from there. But I know there's certainly some interest in from several council members about how can we best utilize those funds in a variety of ways, and so we'll make sure that we're in dialogue with you all the way through this. What I won't do is surprise any of you, with a massive presentation at the last minute and go, hey, we've got 12 hours to decide on whether or not we can actually execute this fund or not. Here you go. Nobody likes a surprise, and so I want to make sure that you have the best information that we can provide and give you time to absorb that and then to execute a decision-making cycle to allow us to move forward.
I mean, it just looks like if this is kind of the guidelines they left it, I mean, that's pretty open for interpretation. It depends on exactly what you're saying. But you're saying their rules will come out sometime in this month?
I skimmed the 151 pages that was released at 3 p.m. today, and even then I can't tell you that's the final guidance. That was just guidance that came out of the U.S. Treasury. So
150 pages.
151 pages, PDF sitting on my desktop.
So Jim, you need a week off to read it.
Yeah.
I can provide a little bit more clarity. It is final interim guidance from the Treasury. Utility does include stormwater. That was something that we were curious about internally. So that is storm sewer, as well as sanitary sewer.
Now that would be helpful with the storm sewer, because I'm sure, Tom, we've still got some of the old exposed systems, and maybe if we can fit that in there, in some of the downtown older neighborhoods. I know like what y'all did on Bunning was great idea.
Absolutely. And so we want to also take a look holistically about our funding strategy. So we want to balance what's already in, say, CPSD 4, that's infrastructure spending there, and how do we get the most bang for the buck to apply, that funding and also this ARP funding once we have our final numbers.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from council?
I think Jim and Rachel have worked hard on this, and I think for council to understand, to reiterate again, if we need to have several meetings about this, so this is just initially to make everybody aware of it, and as they understand those 150 pages and they start weed and filter it down, we'll have a lot better idea for us to have more conversation and really be able to have an input on that. So I thought it's just important to give everybody a bird's eye view tonight, and we'll definitely need to have more conversation and discussion later. But thank you for that, Jim.
Yes, sir. And subject to the mayor's or any council members' questions or concern, that concludes the staff's presentation here at the study session this evening.
All right. Any, before we adjourn, any closing thoughts from anybody?
Just good luck to our baseball team. They start the playoffs, and the girls too, I believe. So the boys and the girls.
Boys soccer, I think, is in the third round.
Boys soccer, we got a lot of exciting sports going on. So good luck to all of them.
It might be tomorrow.
Might be tomorrow. So.
Yeah. Well, again, thank council for your openness and staff as we move forward, and excited about where we're going for the citizens and what we can do in this community. So thank you again, and we stand adjourned.